Hi. Well, here comes chapter 8 of William Saroyan's The Human Comedy. Chapter 8. Be present at our table, Lord. At 7 in the morning, the alarm clock clicked. That's all. And Homer Macaulay sat up. He adjusted the clock so that the alarm would not go off. He then got out of bed and brought out his bodybuilding course from New York and began reading the instructions for the day. His brother Ulysses watched, as he always did, awakening with Homer at the click just before the alarm, which Homer never allowed to go off. The bodybuilding course from New York consisted of a printed booklet and an elastic stretcher. Homer turned to Lesson 7, while Ulysses crowded in under his arm to be nearer the fabulous stuff. After some ordinary preliminary exercises, including deep breathing, Homer lay flat on his back and lifted his legs stiffly from the floor. "What's that?" Ulysses said. "Exercises." "What for?" "Muscle." "Going to be the strongest man in the world?" Ulysses said. "Nah," Homer said. "What are you going to be then?" "You go back to sleep," Homer said. Ulysses obediently got back in bed, but sat up, watching. At last, Homer began to get dressed. "Where are you going?" the younger brother said. "School," the older said. "Going to learn something?" "I'm going to run the 220 low hurdles." "Where are you going to run them?" "I'm not going to run them anywhere. They're wood frames every 10 or 15 yards that you got to jump over as you run." "Why?" "Well," Homer said almost impatiently, "it's a foot race. 22 low hurdles. Everybody born in this town runs the 22 low hurdles. It's the big race of Ithaca. The manager of the telegraph office where I work ran the 220 low hurdles when he went to Ithaca High. He was Valley Champion." "What's Valley Champion?" Ulysses said. "That's the best." "You're going to be the best?" "Well," Homer said, "I'm going to try. Now go back to sleep." Ulysses slipped down in bed, but as he did so, he said, "Tomorrow," then he corrected himself, "Yesterday, I saw the train." Homer knew what his brother was telling him. He smiled, remembering his own fascination with the passing of the train. "How was it?" he said. Ulysses remembered soberly. "There was a black man, waved," he said. "Did you wave back to him?" Homer said. "First I waved first," Ulysses said. "Then he waved first. Then I waved. Then he waved. He sang 'Kentucky, weep no more.'" "Yeah?" He said. "Going home," Ulysses said, and looked at his brother. "When are we going home?" "We're home now," Homer said. "Then why didn't he come here?" "Everybody's got a different home. Some east, some west, some north, some south. We're west." "Is west the best?" "I don't know," Homer said. "I haven't been anywhere else." "Are you going?" "Someday." "Where?" "New York." "Where's New York?" "East." "After New York, London. After London, Paris. After Paris, Berlin. Then Vienna, Rome, Moscow, Stockholm. Someday I'm going to all the great cities of the world." "Going to come back?" "Sure." "Going to be glad?" "Sure. Why?" "Well," Homer said, "because going to be glad to see Ma and Marcus and Bess," and then he looked at his brother, "going to be glad to see you. And Mary Arena next door and her father, Mr. Arena. Going to be glad to come home and sit down and talk and listen to some music and sing and have supper together." The little brother pleaded earnestly. "Don't go," he said. "Homer, don't go." "I'm not going now," the older brother said. Oh, sorry about the phone. I'd start over, but it won't last long. "I'm not going now," the older brother said. "Now I'm going to school." "Don't ever go," Ulysses said. "Papa went, and he didn't come back. Marcus went. Don't you go too, Homer." It's going to be a long time before I go, Homer said, so you go to sleep. All right, Ulysses said. Going to run the 22? The 220, Homer said. The 220 low hurdles. When Homer sat down at the breakfast table, his sister Bess and his mother were waiting for him. The family bowed their heads a moment, lifted them, and began to eat. What prayer did you say? Bess said to her brother. The prayer I always say, Homer said, and then quoted it, saying the words exactly as he had learned to say them when he had scarcely known how to speak. Be present at our table, Lord, be here and everywhere adored. These creatures bless and grant that we may feast in paradise with thee. Amen. Oh, that's old, Bess said, and besides, you don't even know what you're saying. I know all right, Homer said. I may say it a little too swiftly because I'm hungry, but I know what it means. It's the spirit of the thing that counts anyway. What prayer did you say? You've got to tell me first what the words mean, Bess said. What do you mean, what do they mean? Homer said. They mean exactly what they say. Well, Bess said, what do they say? Be present at our table, Lord, Homer said. Well, that means be present at our table, Lord. Lord means a lot of things, I guess, but I guess all the things it means are good. Be here and everywhere adored. Well, that means let good things be loved here and everywhere else. These creatures, that means us, I guess, everybody. Bless, that means, well, bless. Bless means to forgive, maybe, I guess, or to love, maybe, or to watch over, or something like that. I don't know for sure, but I guess it's something like that. And grant that we may feast in paradise with thee. Well, that means exactly what it says. Just grant that we may feast in paradise with thee. Who is thee? Bess said. Homer turned to his mother. Doesn't the prayer mean, he said, that if people are right, they feast in paradise every time they sit down at a table? Thee is good things, isn't it? Of course, Mrs. Macaulay said. But isn't thee somebody? Bess said. Sure, Homer said, but I'm somebody too. Ma and you and everybody is somebody. Grant that this world is paradise and that everybody we ever have food with is somebody. Bess, Homer said impatiently, it's a table prayer, and you know as well as I do what it means. You just want to mix me up. Well, don't worry, you can. I guess anybody can mix me up. But it doesn't make any difference because I believe. Everybody believes. Don't they, Ma? Of course they do, Mrs. Macaulay said. If you don't believe, you're not alive, and you can't feast at all, let alone in paradise, no matter how laden with wonderful food your table is. It's faith that makes anything wonderful, not the thing itself. You see, Homer said to Bess, and then dismissed the discussion once and for all. I'm going to run the 220 low hurdles at the track meet today, he said. Is that so? Mrs. Macaulay said. Why? Well, Ma, it's an important race, Homer said. Mr. Spangler ran it when he went to Ithaca High. You've got to run and jump both in that race. He carries a hard-boiled egg around with him for luck. Carrying a hard-boiled egg around for luck, Bess said, is superstition. Well, what's the difference? Homer said. Superstition or anything else. He sent me for 2-day-old pies from Chatterton's, apple and coconut cream. 2 for a quarter. Fresh pies are a quarter each, so if you've only got a quarter to spend, you get only 1. Day-old pies are 2 for a quarter, so you get 2. Half of each pie for me and half for Mr. Grogan, but he can only eat 1 or 2 slices altogether. That gives me a lot of pie to eat. Mr. Grogan likes to drink more than eat. Mary Arena, the neighbor girl, came into the kitchen by way of the back door. She brought with her a small Woolworth bowl and put it on the table. Homer got up. Here, Mary, he said, sit down and have breakfast with us. I just had breakfast with Papa and sent him to work, Mary said. Thanks just the same. I brought some stewed dried peaches that I made for Papa, Mrs. Macaulay. Thank you, Mary, Mrs. Macaulay said. How is Papa? Papa's just fine, Mary said. Morning or night, though, he likes to tease me. First thing this morning when he came to the table, he said, Any letters? Any letters from Marcus yet? We'll be getting another letter soon, Bess said. She got up from the table. Come on, Mary, she said. Let's go. All right, Bess, Mary said, and then turned to Mrs. Macaulay. But to tell you the truth, Mrs. Macaulay, she said, I'm getting sick and tired of going to college. It's just like high school. I'm too old to be going to school all the time. Times have changed. I, honest to goodness, would like to go out and find myself a job somewhere. And so would I, Bess said. Nonsense, Mrs. Macaulay said. You're both children, 17 years old. Your father has a good job, Mary, and your brother, Bess. But it just doesn't seem right, Mrs. Macaulay, Mary said. It doesn't seem right to just go to school when Marcus is in the army and the whole world is gouging each other's eyes out. I sometimes wish I was a man so I could be in the army with Marcus. We could have a lot of fun together, I bet. Now, don't you worry, Mary, Mrs. Macaulay said. This will all pass. Everything will be the same as ever before we know it. Well, Mary said, I hope so, and then went along with her friend Bess Macaulay to school. Homer watched the girls go. After a moment, he spoke. What about that, Ma? He said. Why, it's perfectly natural, Mrs. Macaulay said, for a couple of girls to want to get out and flap their wings. I don't mean wanting to get out and flap their wings, Homer said. I mean Mary. Mary is a sweet, unaffected, childlike girl, Mrs. Macaulay said. She is the most childlike girl I've ever known. And I'm glad Marcus is in love with her. Marcus couldn't find a sweeter girl. Ma, Homer said impatiently, I know all about that. That isn't what I'm talking about. Don't you see? He paused and then added suddenly, as if it were no use trying to talk about the feeling he had, the feeling that there would be pain out of the war for many people who would never get near to it. Oh well, I'll see you tonight when I get home. So long. Mrs. Macaulay watched him go, wondering what it was he had wanted to tell her. Suddenly, out of the corner of her eye, she saw somebody very small. It was Ulysses in his nightshirt. He looked up at her, almost as a small animal looks up at that creature of its kind, which is its greatest delight and comfort. The expression in his face was deeply serious and incredibly charming. Ulysses said, Why does he say, weep no more, weep no more? Who? Mrs. Macaulay said. The black man on the train. It's a song, Ulysses, Mrs. Macaulay said. She took his hand. Come now, put on your clothes. Will the black man be on the train again today? The little boy said. Mrs. Macaulay thought a moment. Yes, she said. Chapter 9. Rabbits around here somewhere. On his way to school, Homer Macaulay passed a picket fence protecting an empty lot full of weeds on San Benito Avenue. The fence was old and rotten and had no use other than to ornament with majestic ridicule a small area of waste and to protect a bored group of weed tribes which surely needed no protection. The daytime school student and nighttime telegraph messenger brought his bicycle to a dynamic skidding halt, dropped the contraption, and hurried to the fence as if there he would discover something extremely fleeting and apt to be lost if he did not hurry. The fence was about a foot higher than the regulation low hurdles, and as for anything fleeting being there, whatever it might be, it was fleeting with a swiftness that would take a century. Homer studied the fence, the area beyond it, and the running area before it, and then measured the height of the fence, which was considerably above his waist. He now rehearsed a few jumps, went back 10 yards, and then, without any announcement from himself to himself, he turned in a fury and ran toward the fence. When he was near enough, he made a beautiful hurdle, kicked the fence, knocked down part of it, and himself fell into the weeds, but got right up and went back for another try. The wood of the fence broke easily, making a sound that was nobly unnecessary and therefore comical. Although Homer made 7 tries, not one of which was successful. He stopped only when the whole fence had been brought down into still greater ruin. An old man with a walking stick came out of the house across the street, smoking a pipe, and quietly watched Homer. Just as Homer was getting up from the last spill and was brushing himself off, the man spoke. "What are you doing?" he said. "Hurdling," Homer said. "Hurt yourself?" Nah, Homer said, the fence is a little too high, that's all. The weeds are slippery, too. The old man looked at the weeds a moment and then said, those are milkweeds. They make very good feed for rabbits. Rabbits like them. I used to have a hutch of rabbits about 11 years ago, but somebody opened the door in the middle of the night and they all ran away. What did he open the door for? Homer said. Well, I don't know, the old man said. I never did find out who did it. I lost 33 head of the prettiest rabbits you ever saw. Pink eyes, cat faces, Belgians, and 2 or 3 other kinds. Never did find out. You like rabbits? Homer said. They're gentle little animals, the old man said. Domestic rabbits are very mild-mannered. The man looked around among the weeds of the empty lot. 33 rabbits out in the open for 11 years, he said. Well, there's no telling how many of them there are now, not the way they breed, or how wild they are either. I wouldn't be surprised, he said, if this whole city is full of wild rabbits now. I never see any of them, Homer said. Maybe not, the old man said, but they're here, somewhere. The whole city's overrun with them, most likely. A couple more years and they'll be a serious problem. Even so, Homer got on his bike. Well, he said, I've got to go now. I'll be seeing you. You bet, the old man said. My name's Charles. Just call me Charlie. Any time at all. You're welcome to it. Yes, sir, Homer said. Then he went back to his own theme. Going to run the 22 low hurdles at the high school track meet this afternoon, he told the old man. Never did go to high school myself, the old man said, but I fought in the Spanish-American War. Yes, sir, Homer said. Well, so long. Oh, yes, the old man said, but he was talking to himself. Spanish-American War, he said. Ran like a rabbit half the time. Homer disappeared around the corner on his bicycle. The old man strolled back to his little broken-down house, puffing his pipe and looking around. He poked his walking stick into a big weed. Rabbits around here somewhere, he said. Wild by this time, not the way they used to be. Thanks.